I would like to introduce Dr. Penny Sellers. I think Jennifer's passing out the syllabus or the outline of what she's going to be speaking to you about today. So without taking any more time, Penny, come on up. Careful, don't trip on this. Good morning. I don't know, do I need the microphone or am I good to go? Or do you want it recorded? Okay. I never use this. Can you hear me if I do this? However you need it. Thank you. I think this is good. All right. I am just going to jump right in. I'll give you a brief background bio. I started out my career as a preschool teacher. My daughter is 38, so 40 years ago, and really loved working with young children, and then enjoyed working with parents, then went back and got a whole bunch of degrees, and now I have a private practice in Tarzana. I do workshops for preschool teachers. I do home visits for parents who are having challenges with children. Anyways, my information is on here. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out. And we don't have a lot of time, so I want to talk about expectations, limits, and boundaries as a way to get ahead of challenging behaviors. So when we set appropriate expectations for children and we give them an opportunity to reach them, we are creating an environment of safety for our children, and an opportunity to gain confidence and to feel good about themselves. So one of my first ideas is that children should do what they can. If your child can climb into their car seat, they should. If your child could clean up their toys, they should. If your child could hand you their cup or their plate after their meal, they should. If they could carry their backpacks in for preschool, they should. If they could help you pack their lunches, they should. They could wash fruit for you. They could participate in a lot of things. When we set an expectation, and I'm going to sit down for a second. When we set an appropriate expectation for our child and they reach it, they feel really good about it, right? That feeling of, I did it, is the epitome of confidence. When we don't set a high enough expectation, we lower the expectation, we lose that whole opportunity for building confidence, right? Let's say you tell your child you need to clean up your toys, and they say no, and we say, okay, I'll clean up half and you'll clean up half. And then they pick up one thing and we say, all right, I'll do the rest of it for you. Now we've robbed them of that opportunity to get positively reinforced and to feel good. I did it. And for us to say, thank you, that was a great job. Instead, we walk away muttering something, like, I can't believe I had to do that, and you didn't do it, and it turns into a not positive experience. So children should do whatever it is that they can. I put a list on the next pages of some things that are appropriate for children at different ages and stages. I don't want to go through them right now. You guys could do that on your own, but things will come up. But have a look at them because I think some of them are surprising. Of course, it's not a complete list, but I pulled out a few things that I thought might be interesting. It's really important for us to be clear and direct with children. I know that children hear the first 3 words are the most clear, and after that, it's kind of like wah, 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 wah. So the first 3 words we often waste by saying, what are you doing? Or I can't believe this, or I told you not to, or don't do something. And then we miss that opportunity of telling the children what they should do. So the first 3 or 4 words should be what you want the child to do. For instance, your child is throwing sand in the sandbox. You could say, don't throw the sand, or that's dangerous, but then you've lost every opportunity. The more effective way would be to say, sand stays low. Keep the sand on the ground. What you want them to do. Instead of don't climb up on the table, it's like tables are for food, chairs are for sitting. We start out with, honey, when you're finished, and we've lost them. Or if your child is making a bad choice, let's say with a friend, and we start out the conversation by saying, you know, your friends aren't going to want to play with you. We've missed that opportunity where they're really paying attention and listening. So the first 3 or 4 words, be clear, be direct, and try and be positive, or at least be neutral. Don't waste it on being negative. One of the challenges that I notice when I do house calls mostly is that parents ask a lot of questions. And that makes the expectation unclear. If you add okay to the end of something, it implies that your child has a choice of doing it or not doing it. We're going to leave the park now, okay? And then the child says no. And then we start negotiating, right? We're backtracking, we're doing it. So it is time to leave the park. I know that we've all been taught that it's really important for children to make choices, and I agree 100%, but not the main idea, right? It is time to leave the park is the statement. Then you could ask them, do you want to hold the pails or do you want to hold my hand? But not, do you want to leave the park? Are you ready for bed? What do you want for dinner? That's a huge one. Right? I see this so many times. What do you want for dinner? And then the child says, pizza. And the parent says, you can't have pizza today. You had pizza yesterday. And the child proceeds to have a tantrum on the floor. And the parent looks at me like, you see what I'm dealing with. But what I'm seeing is you're asking someone what they want. And then when they tell you, you're saying, no, you can't have it. So 2 choices. 2 choices are really good for children. Number 1, for understanding what the clear expectation is. And number 2, for modeling for your children what are reasonable choices, right? I have parents often say to me, my child doesn't, won't try new foods. Well, if you ask them what they want all the time, they're not going to tell you, oh, I want to try foie gras because I heard it was really good. They are going to ask for the same thing that they like over and over again. And so it really is up to us to set the expectation and to give them 2 choices. They also don't know about nutrition, even though we've been telling them since they were babies what they should be eating and what's important. We're the ones who need to keep track, right? If they didn't have enough protein or if they had too many carbs or what they need. And so when you ask them what they want, it's very big. I find also that all the questions that we're asking children, I think, are contributing to an increase in anxiety that I see in children. Sure. Take questions as long as I don't get sidetracked, then we could talk after.
So if we do the 2 options, for example, what do you want for breakfast? Your choices are cereal or oats?
It's not what do you want for breakfast, because now you've set up that they think there's more things. Like you could have cereal or pancakes for breakfast.
So if you do that, cereal and pancakes, and they say no, peanut butter. How do you navigate the shopping and come back and forth, with them and sort of holding that boundary? How do you navigate that no to keep it positive and direct?
It's a great question, and it's a simple answer, but there's a couple of layers. Of course. One of the important ways that children learn to respect grown-ups and give grown-ups credibility is when we follow through with things. So if you are going to say no, you need to make sure that you're going to hold on to it, right? Because once you say no, you can't go back. You could go back to them later or the next day if they're old enough and say, you know, I told you this morning that you couldn't have that and I thought about it and I probably shouldn't have done that. That's a really good thing to model for our kids, right? That we're flexible, that we're reflexive, that we think about things, that we take responsibility for our choices. So that's one piece. If you say no, you have to stick with it. If you're going to stick with it, there's no reason to go back and forth, right? I call it 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. You say it one time, you repeat it a second time, making like eye contact with your child or a hand under a chin or ask them to tell you back, what did I tell you you were gonna do? And then you follow through with it. You don't have to go back and forth. But you might say something like, I hear you, you really want the peanut butter today. You know what? I'm gonna make sure we have peanut butter for breakfast tomorrow. Or do you want peanut butter for snack when you come home or you want it for breakfast tomorrow? So I hear you, right? Everyone wants to be heard. I hear you, but we can't do that today. But I'm gonna honor your request and offer it to you another time, right? And if you're consistent with it, you know, it is possible the first 2 or 3 or 5 times that your child doesn't believe you and they have a tantrum. Do not be afraid of tantrums. Our children are so smart. They know. They tell me in my office, like, why did you do that? Because I know my mommy gets so upset when when I'm gonna bang my head on the floor, that they do it because they want to get what they want. But they also push those limits if you're not clear and if you don't follow through, right? So it's a whole situation that happens. Yes. Well, that's kind of the problem, right? The problem is that you said it, what was it gonna be, and then they're manipulating around you. If you're okay with it, it's fine. Right now it's peanut butter, but it could be, you know, a $1,000 purse down the line or some other thing that your child is pushing you for, right? So you're laying the foundation now for everything that's gonna happen, right? For how the relationship works. And I guarantee you that it is easier to hold your ground with a 5-year-old than a 15-year-old. So you want to practice now. The problem with that is, like if it's a dessert, like if it's a piece of chocolate or something, I mean, there's all kinds of philosophies about food and making food something that, you know, becomes a bigger issue than it is. It's better to just have it be something that we do and that we enjoy and there's something social in it. I worry sometimes that somebody might force themselves to eat more of something just to get that, right? Which we don't want to do that. You want to eat till you're full, and when your tummy tells you that you've had enough, then you're done and not squeezing in the thing that you were waiting for. But, you know, it's hard for me to give you a precise response unless I see how the interactions go. But oftentimes children wear us down, right? That's what I see. And the more they nudge us, the more the level of anxiety goes up, and then it hits a place, right? And what often happens is parent says no, child says yes, parent says no, child says yes, parent says no, child says yes, parent says no, and then the parent yells, and then, or the parent says, fine, I can't take it anymore, just go and do it. You have to be careful, right? Because your child is learning that if they wear you down enough, you will give in. And then when children, like when tantrums are escalating, when they should be decreasing, like as children get older and have better communication skills, that is often what is going on, right? Where they're wearing you down to the point. So 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. At the third time you're saying no, you're still calm. It's like the 7th time that we start raising our voices. You had a question.
What if they don't want anything though? So a lot of times, like what you're in this example, do they actually understand consequences? Like, so when we get to the, do you want this or this? And he says, no, nothing. I say, okay. So I just let him go to school hungry. Like, I'll just like, and then the only thing I could probably get him is say, I'll eat chips, right? Like he wants some kind of junk food or whatever. So then my question is, should I send him to school hungry, or should I just like, okay, well at least I give him some chips and some nutritional value.
Well, I'm going to think that your child is asking for chips because they know that you're not comfortable with them going to school hungry. Okay.
I just do that.
But then I have other questions to ask. Is there enough time in the morning? What is the routine in the morning? What is your child doing before they're eating, right? If the way that we set things up, and this is great because we're going right into the next section, which is setting appropriate routines. I'm going to use the morning as an example. My ideal routine in the morning is to make sure that your child is up like a good hour before you need to leave the house. They get dressed, they get totally ready, come to have some breakfast. When breakfast is done, if there is time, they could maybe play a game or watch something or do something that they like. If we let our children run around in their pajamas and then they eat breakfast and then we're chasing them back to their room to get dressed and to brush teeth and to do all of those things, if they're watching TV or if they're watching a screen for something else and we're trying to get them away from that to eat breakfast, that isn't going to work. They'd rather be on their screens. So if your child really got up, has been up for a while, has gotten dressed, has done, whatever needs to get done, brushed teeth, brushed hair, and had some breakfast and not been playing, and they're still not hungry, they're probably not hungry. But the chances are they will be hungry, right? Sometimes I have kids who, they need to move a little bit in the morning. I have parents who are dressing their children who are not hungry. Well, I wouldn't be hungry either if I'm watching TV and sipping my milk and somebody's putting my clothes on me. So we need to get them up and moving. I've had parents who give the kids, a watering can to go water plants or to come pick up the dog poop in the yard or something physical, which helps them be more hungry. Also be mindful about the drinking. If your child has a big glass of milk when they first get up in the morning, they're not going to be hungry, right? Sometimes I've worked with occupational therapists with children with feeding issues. They recommend like giving your child some lemonade, unsweetened lemonade in the morning to like wake up your taste buds and wake up your body. So it's not simply what do you want for breakfast or are you ready? It's a whole bunch of things that have to happen. And I believe also that, we're always modeling for our children. They're always watching us. If we're allowing our children to play games before they eat, then we're sort of telling them that the games are more important than taking care of your own bodies. And so we have to be mindful. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it's always like I just want to, I also want to, like, at what age do they understand consequences, right? Like,
They understand consequences very early on,
okay.
but they don't always get the consequence that we want them to get. They do understand if you're consistent, right? If he doesn't eat breakfast or she, they'll probably be hungry, and that doesn't feel good. That should be a natural consequence.
Right.
Sure. Right.
He's not hungry, for some reason it's very little. And then 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I'm hungry. And I go back and forth, yes. And Melissa recently said, like, don't go down to the pantry, have like something for him that's neutral, that he's not excited by. It's not time for his favorite snack. And that's what we can have. But I also heard some people say, well, let him be hungry. But my feeling is, like I'm not actually say when I'm hungry. So like I don't know, like I'm trying to figure out also the consequence. Maybe it would be more effective if I did that twice and let him be very hungry. I also think he's gonna scream and cry and be very, and then I'm gonna have more consequences. So what would you say?
But that's a short-term consequence that you're having. I mean, I think that when you look at that situation, there are so many more important things, right? Like sleep time is sleep time. It's not the time to eat. And you need your sleep too. I, again, have a couple of ideas for that. One is being mindful about what kind of snacks your child is getting after school and the time of it, right? So children shouldn't eat anything 2 or 2.5 hours before a meal. I would add in some good vigorous physical activity somewhere between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and dinner time, but good vigorous activity, like not just, lots of kids come home and they watch screens. They're not running around. Let them run around. And the only thing I would offer is something like water and cucumber, something that isn't really going to fill them up, right? I also think it's really important whether our children are eating or not, that they're at the table, because it's a very social kind of a thing. And oftentimes when they're at the table and not hungry, they eat because there's nothing else to do. So I would put something appetizing. I have another strategy that I call the midnight snack, and that is for children who often refuse to have dinner, but then want something before they go to sleep. As long as you're controlling it, I'm okay with it. So 20 minutes before bedtime, okay, now it's time for our midnight snack, and this is it. The kitchen is closed until the morning. And at that midnight snack, I would not offer anything that your child really likes, because they're not going to eat in getting it. When my kids were younger, I took what was for dinner and covered it, and that's what they could have for their midnight snack. They could actually finish their dinner, and it's not so fun. But getting a good night's sleep is the most important thing that we could do for our children and ourselves. And there's actually a sleep chart on the second page. The American Academy of Pediatrics has gone up and down with sleep, but for many years they weren't recommending enough sleep, and we saw a horrible increase in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And there is a direct correlation between ADHD and sleeping for a certain percentage of children. And some ridiculous number, like 2/3 of kids who are diagnosed ADHD are sleep deprived and are on medication that I heard last night there's a shortage of Adderall. Oh man, this is not gonna be a good week if you know anybody who's on Adderall. But your children need to get a good night's sleep. And you need a good night's sleep to be able to function optimally.
And isn't it causing more of a habit? Like
Yeah.
I know it's really hard for a couple nights, but when you try it out, and then after, what as soon as you're not getting it, after, it won't take that long. Probably
Yeah.
to stop.
I'm also,
He knows he's expecting it.
of course, I am also very much into positively rewarding behaviors that we want repeated, right? So maybe you could offer him something special in the morning when he sleeps through that first night on his own, right? Like a sticker or a stamp, or you sing a special song, or you give him a little chocolate chip, something that will make it special, right? And celebrate that. But children are very smart, and I don't know if you have other children. Like sometimes kids wake up in the middle of the night because it's like a little one-on-one time with a parent. Okay, maybe the baby is waking him up, but if it's within an hour, I don't think the baby's waking him up. But you might try some white noise in his room so that he doesn't hear the baby crying. right? But the priority is we sleep at night. And when I say the kitchen is closed, it's closed, right? Because you work hard all day. Breakfast and snack and lunch and snack and dinner and snack and everybody. It's not fair to get up at 1 or 2 in the morning to have to give somebody something. Thank you. It was a good question. So sleeping, we should have a good sleep routine. Again, children should have, we put our kids to bed. Let's say your child should be getting 11 hours of sleep at night. You cannot usually change the time that they wake up in the morning. So if your child gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning, they should be going to sleep no later than 8 o'clock at night. If your child gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning, they should be going to sleep at 7. Sleep is huge. Yeah? Yeah, it'll tell you when it doesn't tell you on this chart. It's total hours of sleep. But if you look at the 2 to 3, like the 3 to 5-year-olds, it says 11 to 13. That 11 hours should really be at night. The sleep at night is more important. I was talking to somebody yesterday who has a 4-year-old who takes a 3-hour nap in the afternoon. So I'm like, what time do they go to bed at night? Because they're not getting enough sleep. They're trying to make up for it. So the nighttime sleeping is really, really, really important. It is the time when our brains replenish, when our bodies replenish. And if you haven't slept well for a few days, I know with me, I get very irritable and I get clumsy and I am short-tempered. Things don't work well. It's the same thing with children, right? And it's cumulative. So if every night your child is minus an hour of sleep, by the time they're 5 years old, they're minus 365 times 5 hours. And it catches up. So the sleep is really important. And having a good, consistent nighttime ritual is really important. Quiet, calming time is really important. I think it's important for children to, if you're going to read them a story before they go to sleep, it should be done in their room. Like every time you move from one place to another, it's an opportunity for your child to wake themselves up and start, racing back and forth. When they're racing back and forth down the hall at night, they're overtired and you've missed the opportunity for them to go to sleep. So when children are tired, they touch their face. Adults yawn and we want to lie down. Children touch their face. When you see your child start to touch their face at dinner, it's like, all right, let's go take a bath and get ready for bed, right? I always ask parents, what are calming activities for your child? Because we want them to be calm before they go to sleep, right? Some children get all awake when parents read a book that's really animating, and then parents start asking questions. Show me where this is, and show me where that is. And the child is like, now they're awake because they have things to do. So a slow, monotone voice, nothing too exciting. Puzzles could be soothing. Coloring could be soothing. Some children love things like Play-Doh or some kind of a fidget something to hold on to calm down. And things should be organized, right? Before dinner, your child should be expected to clean up toys and put things away. And then from that point on, it's quiet. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no screens for 2 hours before children go to sleep, and no screens before children are 2 years old. Is that funny? It is messing with children's neurological system to have screens on, right? We were not created to learn by sitting and having lights flickering at us. We were screens aren't good. Screens aren't good. Interactive screens are probably worse, maybe, but screens aren't good for our children to learn a lot from. I mean, there is some learning, but I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a program, apples, one apple and it jumps into a pail, and then 2 apples, right? And the child, and 3 apples and 4 apples. If you give your child 5 apples and a pail, think about what the richness of the learning is, right? You get the smell of the apple, you get the feel of it. Each apple has a bit of a different shape. In the pail, out of the pail, under the pail, over the pail. Can you roll it? No, you can't roll it. It has bumps on it. It isn't going to roll. Could you bang it together? That is how human beings are supposed to learn, by having things that we touch and we smell and we taste and we weigh and we think about and we do in a different way. You cannot do that with a machine in front of you, right? So while you could learn the concept of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a very surface level of learning, right? It's so much better for our children to have experiences. So whenever possible, right? I think, the less screens, the better, but it should be in the afternoon on Saturday or in the morning when it's not before you go to sleep at night. Cleaning up is something that should be expected if your children are in school. They are expected to clean up their toys, and they do. They are expected to sit at the table to eat, and they do. There's no reason why that can't be at home too. It's very important, I think, in 2023 to have like a beginning and a middle and an end to things, because we have so many things going all the time. And I'm seeing children losing that skill of finishing something, putting it away, and moving on to the next thing. So setting up times that are organized for our children. It's dinner time, it's cleanup time, it's nighttime, and not, okay, we're gonna go to bed and you're walking over the toys to get to their bed. You're not modeling for them how to create a calm atmosphere and how to relax and know that you did everything, right? If I get into bed and I think about something that I didn't do, it keeps me awake. I believe the same thing happens to kids. If they didn't have a chance to put something away and know that it's done, right? They're still thinking about it. And so we want to help them be organized, and we want to have times. And that's oftentimes why children do well in school. And parents are like, are you talking about my child? They're helping you clean up? They don't help me clean up at home. But it's set up in school that it's very organized, and they understand one thing and then it goes to another thing, and it's very consistent. And over time, children usually rise to the occasion of the consistency. So those are the strategies. I want to talk a little bit about how there is an increase in anxiety and depression in children lately. There's a psychological concept. It's very important for us to learn to be okay to be alone with ourselves, right? Everyone needs to be okay to be alone with ourselves. We all know people who can't be alone, who are always looking for something to do and always uncomfortable. We want to give our children the comfort of being okay to be alone with themselves. It means we have to give them some opportunities to do that. When screens are on, be it television or iPads or anything else, they're not alone with themselves, right? Music in the background, you're still alone with yourself. But the screens, you're engaged with it. And so our children should have some time to feel good about being alone with themselves and to enjoy it, right? Because it's really important. I always think about teenagers who don't like to be alone. You don't want a teenager who doesn't like to be alone. It's a recipe for disaster. So we have to help our children, right? We have to set appropriate limits, and we have to let them be sometimes too, right? So many of our children in 2023, I'm bored, I'm bored. There's no way they're bored. I think about the 3 things that I had to play with when I was a child. You're not bored if you use your imagination. We aren't providing opportunities for our children to be bored, right? And use their imagination. When child says to the parent, I'm bored, 90% of the time I see parents, well, you have this, and you have this, and you have this. It's like, okay, honey, so you're bored. It's not a bad thing to be bored. But we feel like we have to fill in the time and do something. There are so many things for our children to do, right? And it's okay to be bored. Yes? Well, it is a healthy thing to create imaginary friends. It's actually a good thing. It is only a problem when it's a problem, right? It is a problem if your child won't go to school because Jimmy doesn't want to go to school today, or they can't eat because their imaginary friend isn't doing it. Well, if an imaginary friend is more interesting to a child than an actual peer, I would want to get more information about that, right? An imaginary friend is fine to have for a few hours at home, watching you, doing things, helping with you. But if you prefer to be with an imaginary psychological thing that they wish they had a sibling or they wish something was different, and it's okay to wish things, unless the wish is taking over what you should be doing, right? So if your child is playing with other children and social and doing all the things that they should, and when they come home, they have an imaginary friend for some of the time, it's not a problem. If it's taking over and if it's a preference, I would want more information about that. Yeah. So it's a great question, and it's probably a whole other workshop, but I would want to know what is going on. Like, is it good cop, bad cop? Is one parent always saying yes and the other one always saying no? If it's more consistent. One thing I could tell you all, this should be your mantra for the rest of your experience with your children. Do not take it personally. Oftentimes, children pick one parent over the other because it creates a lot of drama and a lot of intensity, right? Children are not mean-spirited. They want energy, and they will take it wherever they can get it. And so, you know, if you're arguing with your partner about who's going to read the book, your child gets an extra 10 minutes to read and play and do whatever they want. I would want more information. If a child really is only wanting one parent, I would want to know why. Like, I often see that after, let's say, somebody's had a baby and the older child bonded with the dad more, and then the mom comes back and is with the baby and the child is still only wanting the dad, right? I would suggest that the mom have some special time with that child outside of putting them to bed at night. My definition of special time is 10 minutes of your undivided attention. But you make a big deal out of it. You know, we're gonna have special time. Daddy, you take the baby. I'm leaving my phone. I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes. It's just you and me. And you spend those 10 minutes observing your child, right? I said earlier, everybody wants to be seen and wants to be heard. You sit with them in their room, you watch them do what they're doing, and you narrate it. Wow, you're taking the doll and you're feeding her. Oh, that's so sweet of you. And I didn't know you liked that color, and look what you could do. Timer goes off, you say, this was so much fun. I loved spending time with you. And you move on. And you build a relationship outside of the nighttime routine, right? In other families, we set up systems, I call it alternating days, where one child gets to be the child of the day who makes choices first. It doesn't mean they get everything they want, but they get the first choice, right? Who's gonna open the door, who's gonna get in the car first, anything that would be changed. And that child might pick who the parent is gonna be, who's going to read the book to them, and then the next day, it's the other child and the other parent. So you could set up a system that seems, objective. But it also warrants a discussion with your partner, like, why is this, and how does it feel, and what can your partner say, and what are they doing, so that you're working together. But don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. You're gonna remember that when your kids are teenagers and they tell you how bad you are, and you're like, good night, sweetie, I love you. And then you go into the bathroom and you start crying, but don't let them see you. Don't take it personally. So having limits helps children feel safe. Having limits helps children feel safe. And so I've seen children who are totally out of sorts, and when you set a boundary, they sit up straight and they get it. If you can hold the boundary and you can follow through with it, it's really good. And again, back to not asking too many questions and making statements. So I am seeing children an increase in anxiety, and I do believe that some of it is because we're putting too much responsibility on our children unconsciously by asking questions that are above what they could really make good decisions about, right? So I gave you some examples like with the food, but I've seen it with other things, right? You ask your child, do you wanna play baseball or do you wanna play basketball? They say, I want to play baseball, and you sign them up for baseball, and they don't like it. And we say, you told me you wanted to do it. It's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility, right? And so I told you not to do that, but you chose to do it anyways. That creates anxiety in children. We're the grown-ups. We know what the big picture is, and we know what the long-term goal is, right? Very often I see parents are living in the short term. Just get through the day, whatever I have to do just to get through the day. But you really should be thinking about the long-term goal. And is what you're doing in the moment going to get you to the long term? Because that is the piece that is more challenging, right? If you want your child, a big one is to have patience in 2023, it means that you have to give them opportunities to feel that. And when they come and they say they're bored and we start shoving all these ideas, we're not helping them learn to be patient, right? When we start racing through something because they want it, we have to do it quickly, we're not teaching them how to be patient and how to wait. And we're not teaching them how to be empathetic, right? Which is understanding what somebody else is going through. And so this idea of empathy in families, where, sometimes there's a child who requires a lot of attention, and they're getting 90% of the oxygen in the house, and everyone else is like scrambling for the other 10%. Take a step back. Help your children. Can you see that I'm busy doing something right now? When I finish doing this, I'll be happy to do that. Instead of leaving what we're doing in the middle and going back, coming back, and then, oh my, you're driving me crazy. I can't even finish what I'm doing. Yes, you can. You do it. I I need to finish this first and I'm going to go somewhere else. And even though it's uncomfortable to watch our children be uncomfortable, you need to think about the long-term goal is to create someone who's patient and empathetic, right? And who's okay being alone with themselves for some time. So think about the long-term goals and what am I doing to get there. If we're always just putting Band-Aids on things, then we're not accomplishing those long-term goals. Am I running out of time? Do a few more minutes? All right. So the importance of setting boundaries. Children are egocentric. They are concerned with their own things. We have to help them, right? 2-year-olds really cannot be empathetic, but by 4 years old, we expect developmentally that children could be empathetic, right? So, pardon? Not all the time. No, it's a hard concept. Even as adults, it's hard to be empathetic, right? It really is hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes and imagine what something feels like when we're being impacted in a negative way. So it's very hard to do. But it's very important, right, to be a good friend, to have good relationships. You have to be able to have that reciprocal. You need to be able to hear what somebody else has to say and sit with the feelings that may be uncomfortable. When you're in a room with your child and you're texting or you're on the phone, your children get a feeling that your phone or your computer is more important than they are. It's very simple. I've had 8-year-olds say that to me exactly. Remember I talked about do something, finish it, and then move on to something else? If you're working, remove yourself. They don't understand. What does a child know about what does work mean? I have to work, you have to be quiet. What does that mean? Child's work is play. They don't understand, right? Remove yourself. The pandemic with everybody working at home and the TV on and the iPad on and the phones ringing and everything all over the place was very complicated and not so great for our children. If you work at home, you should go into a space, close the door. Put a red sign on one side and a green sign on the other. When the red sign is there, nobody goes in. Children have to learn that there are boundaries, and we have to learn to put our phones away when we're spending time with our children. So oftentimes lately, I've been recommending having a screen-free time with everybody, like from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, all the screens go into a basket, all the phones, and even if the phone is ringing, we're not leaving it because we're showing our children that this is the priority, right? I'm with you, we're gonna spend time, we're gonna be together, we're gonna have a meal together. So it's really important. They don't understand what it is to work. They don't understand if you're in the room and you're on the phone, they are thinking that you're paying attention to them. And they get very upset when you're not. I guess that's it. I've done most of it. Maybe let's look at the some of those expectations for children. What do I think is really interesting? Sure, let's do that. Okay. Okay.
My son was potty training, well, since he was 3 years old, a year, and he's still having emails. So he said, and you stay dry, like, you know, your iPad. You don't stay dry, your iPad just gets wet. I don't even feel your parents on. So it's like, he said, like, oh, I forgot. It was an accident. It was an accident. It was an accident.
How old is he?
He's almost 4 in May.
So is he aware when he has to go? Like the accidents are happening because he's playing and he doesn't want to leave what he's doing.
But I don't know if he tells you that, did I ask him, like, this happens, you're saying your friends, you don't wanna go, or not tell your teacher, like,
Does it happen at home too? Does he have to clean it up and take care of himself? Takes off his pants and puts the soiled underwear in the sink, goes and gets new underwear, goes and gets new pants, washes the soiled underwear in the sink, right? If you make it so that it takes him 10 minutes to clean himself up and go back, he will choose to go to the toilet. That only takes 2 minutes rather than taking so much time away from him. That's one thing. Another thing might be to have the teachers remind him every so often to just go over and tell him, not ask him, do you have to go to the bathroom? Because there's that question again, but it's time to try on the potty. And everybody goes, right? But I want to make sure that you know that he knows that he feels it. Because there are sometimes, like, you should speak to a pediatrician. There are things that could, okay. I would want to come up with a different kind of a reinforcement system because the one that you've offered him isn't working. Like, does he get the iPad other times?
yeah, if he stays dry.
But if he doesn't stay dry, does he still get the iPad at other times? So he never has the iPad unless he's dry. And then how long does
Does he come in and ask for that if he knows, does he get, I guess, he can't get it.
So it's not an effective commodity. You have to find the commodity. Does he wakes up wet in the morning? Does he drink a lot? Before he goes to bed at night?
Is it every day again? Is he having an accident?
No, not every day.
Not every day.
No, it's not every day. I think it's once a week. It's getting better, like,
What if we took your pressure off at night?
I put him at full, I don't think the pressure's on there. We're not even there yet. Yeah, yeah.
But it's getting better.
Yeah, it's slowly getting better.
But it's getting better. If it starts to get worse, I'd be concerned about it. It's slowly getting better, and hopefully it will be better. I wonder if, like, your reward now is, like, if he's dry during the day, he could have the iPad in the evening. Like you said, he doesn't even ask for the iPad, but on the days that he's dry,
He's dry, yeah, I want my iPad, then he gets one. And I have that. But if he comes home wet, he knows he's not getting it, so he's gonna ask, like, he's like, gets it. No, yeah.
So the incentive of the iPad is not making him stay dry all the time, so we need to find something that will.
does he, what?
I know how social our kid is. Have him not be able to go on a play date or, maybe you can try that. I feel like that would be important.
So maybe what you could do is every day that he comes home dry, you keep track of it, right? And when he has 5 days in a row that he's dry, you can have a play date for him. Would that work? But sometimes if it's too long to wait, right? Like Disneyland, you're probably not going to give it to him for 2 days being dry. Yeah, that's too long to wait for a 4-year-old, right? So every 5 check marks, every 5 days should be some kind of a reward. Otherwise, he's going to lose interest. Yeah. And maybe you could even make him like a coupon that says, I was dry today, or I made good choices today, or whatever you want, and he could collect them, and then he could cash them in for something. You go to the dollar store and get some things. I don't know. You can make it really fun. Maybe that would be more incentive for him. But I like that he's going in the right direction, and I know that when we make it so that it really is not fun to have an accident, that has another impact on him, right? Yeah.
So another good question, because we're trying now, especially at school,
old is he?
He's almost 4.
Okay,
He just started being trained after like 2 failed attempts at water skiing and all this in November. School is an issue. He had like 2 bad incidents where he almost fell into the toilet here and he got like traumatized, and so now it's a control issue. And so he will go, I'm sure your jokes, he will go any, like he is perfect everywhere else, but at school it's a big power dynamic with the teachers. And he will only go at school if my husband and I go with him. So we left him in the middle of our workday many times, like it's not sustainable. He has reward charts, he loves reward charts, he's very motivated by it, he likes snacks, he eats that, like he does the best he can. He will hold it as long as humanly possible. He won't have an accident. And now with enrichment classes, which are until 2:30, he will have an accident. But he, like, doesn't feel that bad about having to me or doing anything like that. He said, I just want to go to the bathroom and feel alone with the teachers.
and it's worked, because you've even left work to come and be with him, right?
Well, we were hoping that would be a transition, because first he was just scared of the bathroom. So I guess it's also moving a little bit in a better direction. Like he's totally fine going to that bathroom, but he still does not want to go with the teachers.
Well, if you're going to keep doing that, I would have the teacher go with you also to the bathroom, so that that teacher would be familiar with that. I wonder if we could, again, set up a specific reward system for him. I wonder if there's something that we could give him to do when is he sitting on the toilet?
Not here.
No, like he's using the urinal, he just will hold it until like basically the enrichment and then he doesn't even drink enough water. Like he sometimes is so motivated not to have an accident because he does like the whole thing, will not drink water or come home with full water, and that's not okay. He loves school elections, he loves tracking people, all of that. It's not enough because the fear, I think, or the discomfort.
Well, I hear you, and I think there is some fear, but there's not enough fear that he's not going without you, right? Sometimes if someone's really traumatized, they will never go in that bathroom. It could be you, it could be the teacher, it could be the rabbi. They are never gonna go in that bathroom. As soon as they see the bathroom, they have a panic attack. So it's not that kind of fear. I think that he did get uncomfortable, right? And then I think that so often it's sort of how we react to things, right? We get all panicky. And I think you and I should talk individually, because I want to get more information about what it is. Is this the same one that wakes you up at 1 o'clock in the morning for a snack? But sometimes what I see, let's say for an example, is a 3-year-old who all of a sudden doesn't want to go to sleep one night. And the parent says, "Are you afraid of the dark?" Yes, the child says. They're not afraid of the dark. But now we've planted a seed. Okay, I'll leave the light on. Is this bright enough? I'll leave this one on. I won't leave that one on. I'll leave the door open. We start jumping around, right? So he said that he almost slipped in the toilet, and oh, you almost slipped in the toilet. I'm going to come with you next time to make sure that you're safe. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but some variation of that, where we've given the child the idea that, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Instead of like, all right, let's see if we could work this out. You know, you've slept in this room every night. I'll stay an extra 5 minutes. I'll rub your back tonight, instead of all the lights, right? And then I get calls that no one is sleeping because all the lights are on in the house, because child wants all the lights on in the house. But when I go to find out how it started, it usually starts with the child, you know, saying that they don't want to go to sleep, and a parent saying, "Are you afraid of the dark?" Children grew in the dark. They're not afraid of the dark. We understand dark as a concept for adults to be afraid, but children are not usually afraid of the dark. Any other questions?